everybody's actually, because now everybody's on the site, obviously, and to gather our information and to share our information, it, the memory map thing and everything was, it's too much work. And it makes it hard for everybody because only one person's getting information and nobody else can really. It's hard for everybody to scroll through that to see what's really happening when it's mixed with chat and everything else. So what I did was I set up a blogs, a special categories for our sections of law in the blog. So anytime you you have information, instead of copying and pasting it into the Skype chat, how would you copy and paste it into a blog from your profile? So from your actual profile, all you'd have to do is, there was a share screen thing here. Where the hell did it go?
Maybe add it to this chat, and then when it gets the AOK from someone else who thinks it should go up there, then they go away and throw it in their blog. That way we wouldn't have to filter so much of the blog stuff. We got kind of, do you know what I mean?
Okay, do you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so from your, okay, this is my profile. So from your profile, all you have to do is just click on blog, new blog, and I'm gonna redo those videos. So yeah, they're not the best. As you can tell, I don't like doing videos. I'm not good at that stuff. So basically, there's some extra categories here. These are the 5 main categories: understanding, learning, proof, claim, reversion, right? And then the main category, law. You can put if you're not sure which category it goes in, you can just put it in law. If it's like a definition or a quote or something, you can just throw it in the law section, right? Like, so law will be the miscellaneous category, right? And then all you do is you just copy and paste whatever you want right into that box. There's 2 boxes. I'm actually going to leave it like this because on the video I said I'm going to take the top box, the introduction, away. But it'll just make it more difficult for everybody. So whatever you're going to post, the first 10 lines, put it up here in the top box, and the rest put it in the bottom box. It's that simple. And everything all by itself. So, and all you do is you copy and paste. If you got it in a WordPad, just copy and paste it in here and click save. You don't even have to play around with it and make it pretty or anything. Name it, give it a title, and drop the first few lines of it in the top and put the rest of it at the bottom and click create blog. Because then what happens is we all have access to it just by going to this blogs category. And then at any the search function as well. So it'll search the entire blog area for the exact that treatise that I made. So this is what it would look like. So this is that top page where you just drop in the first few lines that you want, right? Up to about 10 lines or so, right? Because the more lines you put in the top, the bigger that this box is going to be. So if you only want it to be a short little thing like this, then this is all you want. This is all you want it to put in, right? And then the box will be tiny like this bottom one. So then when you click on it, right, so all this information will be here for everybody at all times. So we won't have to worry about struggling, right? So as you can see, I only put this much info here in the top, right? And everything else and from your profile, you can all of the blogs that you created, are right there in your profile, and you can edit them at any time right from your profile. So I think this itself is going to make it super simple for people where they'll actually just, yeah, it's the same thing as pretty much throwing it into Skype or even into your activity, right? It's actually better to put it into a blog. So I'm editing, and to edit, I just clicked that. I don't know if you guys caught that, but I clicked that little gear thing at the side, and this is what it looks like. So I pasted it. I'm doing it in actual code. I don't use these editors. So this is how I do mine. So it's a little bit different, but you can get the editor to do this exact same thing that you see here, right? So you can edit your own stuff at any time that you want and whatever you want, and it just makes it super simple with this editor because you don't need to know any HTML, and then just click update blog. So at any time you can go in and add more information to a blog, and so on and so forth. And I think that will make everything a lot easier for us to be sharing information. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, seems like it goes smoothly.
Because then for the things that right? Because I think it would be easier because then once we read, then we can say, okay, well, that's a really good piece that we should actually want to show in the treatise, right? And we can show it there, right? Because here, because at least by everybody having the information there, they can read it and then chat about it and everything else. Because then we got you got the chat rooms, right? And then you also have the forums. You have your activity stream here to chat about things, right? And if you notice, now everybody can add pictures and you can add pictures and everything now. And then there's the likes, right? So, and it also automatically updates. So when someone comments on this, it's going to come to the top, right? If you go down to the bottom and comment on something, it'll pop up to the top. So a lot of the updates to the site have made a lot of really good improvements. And then we also have the forum, and everybody already knows about the forum, so I don't really have to get into that. So, yeah, but everything you do right from your profile, even all your forum stuff is here, any groups that you want to make, you can make them completely private as well, so nobody can even see that there is a group. So you'd actually have to invite them. So yeah, everything that you need to do is now right at your profile. And I also cleaned up the menu. So when you click on the log, because now there's a separate menu for each one of these menus on the actual. So this is the menu here on the side, because this is, remember when you hovered over English law, it had all those menus. Well, now it's all just here. So they're all still there and everything else. Now it's just here.
That didn't last too long.
So, what's that?
Anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I think Ez is having problems.
You're back, Ez?
Yeah, get back.
Yeah, we could actually hear you before you left the call.
I don't know, it just dropped out after I said that.
Oh, okay. So now everything has its own side menu, so it's not going to be hard, right? Like even so, but that's that. I don't think we really have to go in. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff, website or anything? It's all pretty. That made it a lot simpler, didn't it?
I really like how it's coming along.
Yeah, we should be able to funnel it now easier.
Okay,
How
so
are we going to get on subjects that we like? So we have a kind of a, I don't know, a running training kind of going on each week, because we kind of like got off that for like the last month.
that's and that's one thing that once we actually start with an agenda, we actually have to stay on topic and work through the agenda, and then after the agenda is done, then ask the miscellaneous questions. So that's one of the issues that we're kind of getting into, that we kind of get into miscellaneous questions and get off the agenda. So
well, that's what I was kind of thinking is, what if, and that everybody, of course has to agree, but what if we started like working our way down the treaties, basically talking about those particular items, and if someone says, yeah, this should be in there, then we just all like kind of add to it right there, and so we're basically talking about that particular subject, like would be the law of nature or law of reversion or life tenant or whatever it would be that's on the subject, and then when we move from that subject, then we both updated the treaties and at the same time talked about that particular subject. Because if we talk about things that are on there,
the tree ties thing, that's how to it's more for when people choose to contribute. It's going to grow as fast as what people contribute to do it. I don't have enough time to build that and do all the reversion stuff right now. So I'm doing the reversion stuff to make sure all that is all together, because that's the most important part.
Yeah.
The tree ties is only really a light bulb. It's only so people can actually start to realize what's really happening. It's not up to me or to any one of you to take on the duty to make sure that everybody has this baby fed to them. That's why, in my opinion, and it's a group thing, and whoever chooses to contribute to it, that's the only way it's going to grow. And I don't think we should be putting a lot of focus into that. I think we should be putting more of our focus into like the group meetings and stuff. This stuff is not for the tree ties. This is for us discussing on what the things that we need to discuss for what we need to learn to get to the reversion area, because we're going to be splitting this up into two different sections, because the guys that are ready to do the actual heavy reversion stuff, they're not able to have any of they're not able to get that information, because these meetings tend to be stuck on the very basics of law, and a lot of it isn't even the basics.
I was just thinking that it was just covering everything, a piece by piece thing, so we could have a subject to cover that particular week. But I understand what you're saying.
But that's what I'm kind of getting at right now. We need to figure out what you guys really want, because by focusing on the tree ties, it means that we're focusing on the tree ties and not what people need. If we focus on what people need, hopefully they will contribute by the things that they read and the things that they find. All they have to do is throw it in the blog instead of posting it on Skype chat or on Facebook activity, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? You can do that too, but make sure the first place you put it is in the blog.
Yeah.
By
So
us doing that,
and once it goes into the blog, then you'll grab it from the blog and put it in the right spot in the treatise. Is that the way you're saying?
Well, yes, and we can also it's not only for the treatise. It's so everybody can every day take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to go through the blog that isn't full of repeats and chat, right? Because Skype is turning into 1,000+ messages a day. How can anybody work as a group on a specific thing, especially when you're talking about English law, when there's 1,000 different subjects in it? And then we got our miscellaneous chat and quotes and all these other things as well on top of that. So this way, by us having the blog and these just the important things, I don't mean making a blog a mile long. It only has to be, right, this is what I found and check it out, right? Give a little brief discussion at the very top, could be what you write, right? And to kind of get, right, your information in the bottom part. It's as simple as that. And then by us having that blog there, other people that are reading are seeing, okay, well, this was a light bulb for you, right? So when I read it, right, after reading what you say and then reading what you post, now I can come and have a chat with you. You kind of see what I'm getting at? Now it makes it so it's now available to all whoever choose it, and it's not going to be buried in 10,000 messages. Because the things that, like, if something gets posted now in Facebook, in Skype, by tonight, it's useless to try to scroll back up to find it again. Because as soon as guys start chatting again, before you even know it, we're at 1,000 messages. Right? Because there's just so much stuff. Like, looking in the right areas of law, the amount of information that we can find to show the current, we can't even say that they're wrongs because they're right for that point of view, right, for that jurisdiction. So now that we realize that right, all these things is pretty much what does your point of view for the jurisdiction that you're in, right? And that is only your point of view because it's only your jurisdiction. Everybody else has their own point of view, and that's where that's where their issues come along. So by having that blog and being able to work with people in that fashion, I think we're not gonna get so lost. The chat room can just, right, you can just keep chatting in the chat room and then public chats and stuff like that, and we can even make all kinds of chat rooms, right, where you have a different chat room for every different area of law. So when you want to go to, right, but that's still getting a little bit complicated, right?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I've been doing. That's kind of what I've been doing anyway, because like when I see a lot of things in the chat, I go back to the first one, and even if it's like 500 of them, I go and I try to read through all of them, and then when I find something that's great, I take it and I put it in my own little thing, which now, instead of going my own little thing, it'll go back onto the blog, I guess, because, a lot of things that are said are like, especially things that you were saying, they're like little important points that you don't really, think about every single day. A whole new study, and then that would be that part of the blog, I guess, because it relates to that subject. But
yeah, instead of adding it to your bunch of your chat rooms, you should have some open office, or even use that mind map, right? And you can add it to the mind map, and once you have so many, that would make a nice little blog, right? All on the same kind of thing. Then toss it and make it into one blog, right? And then you know that's on the blog, so then you can drag that from your memory map spot where it needs to be, right, where you need to add. You can drag it over to the has been added. So now you know on your memory map, okay, well, I've added this already, and now it's over there, right, because it's in the added already. So all my new stuff I can just keep putting in this area over here, right? Like, that's the benefit. And that's the exact same thing that how the website works. It is that easy. Just I want it in this category, right? So it's even that simple with the blogs. You could even just take the blogs and so that's what I mean. We shouldn't even be concerned about the website. It's as you guys read. I think this should be in this section, right? Then I'll go put it.
Okay, for anybody.
So, and that's everybody. That's everybody and anybody. Because the treatise is Omnipotence's treatise, right? It's not William's website, right? It's not William.ca. It's Omnipotence.ca, and it's Omnipotence is about working together in a natural capacity where you can actually turn a circle into a square into a circle to achieve the impossible. That is basically what Omnipotence is about. And the only way to achieve those things is by working as a team. And that's the reason why Omnipotence was built, right? And that's why it has all the features that it has, right? And projects is going to be coming back. It's just going to be coming back in a different way. So it's going to be it's just going to, so don't even worry about the projects are coming back. I just need some time to get it all done. Because I think the projects area, once people learn how to use that, it's an invaluable tool. Because that's what I use to be able to find a lot of this stuff. To keep myself on track on right? Because it keeps you on track with time schedules and everything. So.
Earlier on today, I posted a thing I found out and printed out a long time ago, but it was called Christian Philosophy and the Common Law. And I went through and read it, and it's like 60 pages or something. But the neat thing about it was all about like lots of natural law and how everything all created itself, over time, kind of like a little 60-page history of everything, how it worked. And it's had a couple of, I haven't read the entire thing, but it had a lot of little ideas where it referred to treatises. And I think it says that Fortescue wrote what Professor E.F. Jacob rightly calls a very important treatise on the De Natura Legis Natura, and it says this work was written at the time during the War of Roses when Fortescue was a fugitive in Scotland and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, it's kind of, I want to go back and look at it and see what a treatise was and kind of more or less how they formed it up. Because I know it's just a simple kind of overview of kind of what you're talking about. It's your, treatise. But then it has all these examples, and there's a lot of treatises that were written back in those days. There was one called De Laudibus and De Monchiria. Anyway, a bunch of them, and they're all on different things like natural law and all kinds of different stuff, so if we can find those. Because the thing is ripe with footnotes, too. It's up in there.
Yeah, a treatise is basically simply what it's your opinion, right? And by it stating a treatise, and that's why in law they specifically say a treatise, and it's so everybody realizes that this is one person's research or a group of people's research, and it's their opinion, and this is what they're showing to support it. It is not an attack on anything. It's just research, right? And it's never written in a form where it's an attack on anything, right? You see what I'm getting at? It's just, this is what I found, right? And this is what I believe it means, right? And you take it from there, right? And the only difference between a treatise written by me or you or a group and an actual judge is the things that are written by the common law judges, they wrote them into law while they were sitting on the bench.
Oh,
right? Because you got to remember, only equity cannot create law from the bench. So when everybody says you're creating law from the bench, they're completely wrong on what they actually mean, what that term even means, and why they're even because equity requires Parliament or government to create a law. So a corporate judge cannot make corporate law, right? But common law is different because if there is no law of equity, common law takes its place, right? But in common law, if there is no law, there has to be a law, right? Like if there is no remedy currently, if some new situation comes up and there's no remedy in equity or no law in equity, it falls back onto the common law. Right?
You make a new writ, don't you?
That's right, and then that's where the common law judge creates a new writ and a new process, or yeah, I guess it would be a process because, like pith and path, like I'm not sure if you guys know about that stuff. Done by judges to determine if something has proper subject matter and a right. You know what I mean? If somebody actually has the right and everything to proceed with the case, type of thing. It's a little bit more in depth than that, but that's basically the gist of it. So, common law is the only area that can create law because that's the only place where it's ever been created. Because if you realize, the monarchy has never actually written a law, ever. The monarchy doesn't even know how to write the law, right? It's done by her subjects, and so that's why they're queens and kings judges, bound by doing what's best for that agreement to make sure that it always falls in line with the original grant, which would be the land tenure, right? So the Queen's job as trustee is to make sure that those things can never happen, right? So that's why only a common law judge can actually make a law. But as you can see, by all right, after 1,000 years of these fuckers being able to go at it with a pen and paper, we can see they pretty much got it covered, right? Like they pretty much thought of everything you can think of and more, right? Like you can't make this shit up, right? And they did it. They did it before the time of Christ because if you notice, Justinian and Roman law is basically what our English law is. It's those two merged together in their entirety, right? Because
in holy matrimony.
Exactly, yeah, right. And that's kind of why English law does the marriage thing between man and wife, and that's why English law makes the wife inferior, but yet nature, she's the one that calls the shots, man. Right? You kind of look at everything else, look at the lines and everything, right? There's pretty much everything in nature. The female calls the shots, and the guy's like, okay, yeah, I'll go and do that for you, and I'll do that, right? And it's always usually the protector and the feeder, right?
I got a quote from that out of this little thing I told I posted there. It says, here and elsewhere, Fortescue expressly teaches that the law of nature, which is the keystone of his jurisprudence, is the ground of all law.
Well, exactly, because if well, just look at that monkey video, right? There's nothing that we can do until we actually can fully recognize that. There's nothing that we can actually do to change it, right? And that's the basic fundamental to natural law, right? Like not until that you can actually realize what's happening around you and everything else in an extreme manner do you actually have the power to change it, right? Like because we have the understanding that we do, because we've been domesticated so badly, right? Most animals in nature, once they've been domesticated by equity, they can no longer survive in nature, because by the time that they snap out of it and realize, hey, I have to start taking care of myself, they've dwindled themselves down to almost nothing, right? And now they can't. The chances of them living are very slim, right? Because they were used to a gold platter all the time, right, with food. They didn't have to do anything, right? They'll gorge, right, and then they won't eat for a while. And if they're not always on the hunt and doing certain things and always taking certain precautions, they're not going to make it, right? So as soon as you get to a certain understanding, you can realize, hey, okay, I have to do these certain things, right, or I'm not going to make it. And a lot of people have kind of forgotten about that part, right? Because the biggest thing in people's minds is, okay, well, who's going to take care of this? Who's going to do this? And blah, 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 blah. Well, there is none of that, right? Like, we're talking about something completely different now, right? Now you have to take care of yourself. There is no agreement with the group that, right, if you're going to get sick for 2 weeks and you're just by yourself and you decided that you never stocked up on your foods and everything, you always live day by day, right? Well, the good chances are if you get sick for 2 weeks, you're not coming back unless you get some help, right? And people just won't look at things like that in the proper manner. So that's where that domesticated thing in the law of nature comes in, and why when a lot of people try to go in and even vest their estate, and I posted this because this is in the Harvard Law that I actually posted in Skype really early this morning. I think it was like 12 hours ago, like 3 o'clock in the morning my time, and it's basically in there stating the exact same things, that you can't expect to have a benefit and everything else without paying for it. So that's what the group is. You're paying for that benefit, and you're also having to give everything to that group, right? So that's where that law of nature thing comes in, is because when people go in to try to vest their estate, they're like, well, you have to do this and do that, and it's like, no, there is no more of that. The lands that you're claiming, that's what you're claiming, and all the natural resources on it, and that has come from it only. So you can't just go around and start claiming everything from around the world everywhere you go, unless you're actually going to be moving your domicile, right? So as you can see, there's different avenues to do those things. People just can't do them in the way that they think that they can do them in, right? Like, you literally have to move your domicile to a different, right? You'd have to move to another domicile if you wanted to stop what was happening on that piece of land, right? Can you see what I'm getting at? And then the catch is that the domicile that you leave behind, because you've left it behind, there's now no owners left, so it automatically cheats back into the English law jurisdiction, right? See what I'm getting at? Because no land, in fee simple, no land can be not owned. Otherwise, the fee simple can go and rape it and do anything they want with it, because there's no laws to restrict them from it. See what I'm getting at? So when we look at how this system and everything is set up, it's a vicious system, but it's a vicious system that actually protects your trust and restricts all the fee simple. It's not actually restricting us as donors. So the biggest thing is when we actually realize that we can take care of ourselves, and it's really easy, and all we have to do is just start looking at life in a different fashion, that, hey, we don't have that guarantee where we can just say, hey, you have to do this. right? Like medical and everything else, that's a different situation. They're pretty much bound to take care of those things for you, right? Especially considering that they've taken everything, right? So, and that also goes into that all the things that were taken into trust, right? When you take that thing back, everything that thing consisted of, and everything that everybody attached themselves to that thing, also belongs to you. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So it actually it goes into many different layers, and they're all based on the exact same thing, on who owns the lands and what the territory boundaries are, right? So, yeah. Anybody can cut me off at any time, eh?
What do you mean by the boundaries in that situation, William? Just like the geographic boundaries, or are we talking boundaries, i.e., like what happens when the geographic boundaries are breached, i.e., setting the terms and conditions of if someone enters your land and does something, what's got to happen? Like, do you mean it that way, or?
Exactly. Yes, the territorial boundaries is basically that fake line that.
Yeah.
Right? That is your jurisdiction and your lands. Now, the interesting thing is that fee simple and the English jurisdictions do not have the authority to keep you off their lands. You can travel through them all you want, and matter of fact, you can move your domicile to inside and claim lands anywhere you want. This reverses, though, when it's fee simple in your lands, because when you're in the capacity of sui juris and you have your own true ownership of lands, in English law, they look at you like you're the City of London Corporation and you're a jurisdiction with, right, your own jurisdiction. So the only reason why you're actually allowed to go into the City of London Corporation, into Washington, D.C. Corporation's territory, because they made the law to allow no border crossings, right, where you only had to go through certain streets and everything else had a wall and chain, right, barbed wire fence and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the only reason why that's not in the City of London to do that, right? They made the law to allow the fee simple subjects to go inside their territory at any time without any documentation, special documentation. But now, what happens to you if you get charged with a crime within that or the City of London Corporation? Right? You're now in a trial in a different country. They made the agreement that now you're bound by the City of London Corporation laws automatically, right? Because the country that you're fee simple in made the agreement with that other corporation saying that, yes, our laws are going to apply and you can enforce them any which way that you want to if our subjects go onto your land. Right? See what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I remember seeing in a film, and it was to do with the cross-examination of a terrorist, and they had him in what's called international waters that's not owned by anyone. And what they done was they put up just a flag on the table, as if to say, "Well, you're here now," and then took the flag off the table. "Well, you're not here now."
That's right. It's that simple.
They were just picking up the domicile, as simple as like putting a piece on the table, a chess piece. Boom.
Exactly.
Now you're here. Bang. Now you're not here.
You're not the sovereign, right? Right. Not unless you have subjects, right?
Yeah.
But you're sui juris, right? So now you're above anybody in English law, including the monarchy themselves, because you got to remember, you're the only one that's acting in your own right. the monarchy is acting in right of a land tenure granted by you. There's no more contract, right? It's that land tenure contract that puts you below them, right? Because that's what a trust is, right? That's the very first thing in a trust is you giving that right to someone else. Now you have to go and ask that person for anything to do with that thing that you granted to the trustee, right? The trustee is now the assumed owner until the true owner comes back, right? So that's why the first level of trust is between you and the monarchy, right? And the monarchy created a corporation, right? Because you got to look at the very beginning, it was just the monarchy and you, right? It went you, the monarchy, right? You as donor, the village, right? Because villages were villages because you didn't have any right to the lands, right? Because it was a straight, flat-out tyranny. You didn't have any choice when they were doing this in King William's reign and pretty much up to 1600s. You did not have a choice unless you could read ancient Latin and you knew ancient Roman law and ancient Justinian law and a bunch of other things, which, let's face it, back in that day, like look how many people know it today. Right?
Slim to none are the odds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what are the odds, right?
It's funny because it's actually that same way today, because people who don't know how to read the English law are just like as if they don't know how to read.
Exactly. We're not dissecting every word on the page, right? We will, right? And I've actually been kind of dealing with that, especially with people on Facebook, because you can't even deal with the law anymore with these people on Facebook because it gets into a huge pissing match. So it's just like whatever they post, looking at, ask them, what does this word mean? And what does this word mean? What does this word mean? What does this word mean? And prove them what the words actually mean. And there you go, you're done. Right? It's just things like that. Like even in court, all the when we flip how we're going at this around, and I mean exactly 180 degrees. When people stop going at the court, towards the courts and at the courts in the way that they're going at it, it won't change. It's done by realizing that you know what jurisdictions are and everything else, and that you actually call the shots. Right? Because that's what jurisdiction is. Because as soon as you realize that they don't actually have any jurisdiction, that he can say all that stuff all he wants, right? And that he's going to make this judgment, right? That's fine. Make that judgment. And no, I'm not going to do it. And guess what? And it doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm not even going to appeal it. I'm going to wait till you come after me about it. And make sure you say that right to his fucking face. I'm going to wait till you actually come after me about it because it means nothing. And when you
until he's committed to force.
That's right.
And that's when English law is like jiu-jitsu in a way that it's the art of defending yourself without attack.
That's right.
In other words, you've got no form of attack yourself, but when someone tries to attack you, you're some mean-ass motherfucker. And that's what the English law is. Until actually there's like something wrong, then it's basically just pissing in the wind.
Exactly.
Until you do something wrong and stand in the other side of the wind and in the piss, then it's never going to touch you. So, they can threat all day long and like words to words in that sense, but as soon as you've done an action, and then they're fucked. And that's when we can use it then against them. So it's sort of like jiu-jitsu in its way. You've got to have it happen to you to have the harm done, to get law to react for you.
But you got to remember that's also twofold. I post. That's it. This is the. Did everybody in the room here get the? I copied Harvard's first year property law course, like the website, and so you can actually have the whole course offline and view it in the browser at any time you want. If you don't have it, it's in my profile. Same with the Bracton. I copied that website also of the Bracton Volume 2 and 3 and 4 translated. I have Volume 1. I have those volumes, but they're not translated. I have Volume 1 if anybody wants it. It's because the other 3 volumes are already in that zip file, but it's not translated. Hold on a sec, Ez, before I lose my train of thought. In the law of property course, it's not just enough to have possession of something or to assert a right over something. Like it also has to do with who has the to the corporeal thing, because we got to remember in English law, everything belongs to the monarchy in majority of the common law and equity. Only when you get into the doctrine of reversion does it actually tell you that that is even an assumption, and it's actually us in our true capacity that are the real owners. So that's why it goes from us that are in natural law. When we grant it to the monarchy, it turns into a corporeal hereditament, right? And then she created a corporation to manage the trust, right? Which is an incorporation, right? It's incorporated, right? So that's where the incorporeal hereditament comes from. But an incorporeal hereditament came from the corporeal hereditament, right? So in the law of property, you're going to read that it also requires who has the true right of corporeal, right? Who has the true right to the corporeal hereditament. So that's why when fee simple, or like, that's why it was, and this is that piece about about a fox hunt, right? About a guy with dogs was hunting a fox in nature, and some other guy was able to get in there and kill the fox, while this other guy, he already wounded the fox, right? And he was in pursuit of it and everything else, right? And it's about who has the right to the fox in nature, right? And it's kind of an important thing. It's actually a very important thing. And they're dealing with the root cause of this in that class for this assignment. And we will see that it takes not only the pursuit and you actually taking the thing, it's who has the actual capacity to take that thing, right? Because you got to remember that everything in English law is granted by a license. So you can't even hunt deer or anything else until you get a license, right? See what I'm getting at? Because you're getting a license to kill an animal that is not yours, right? Because you don't have that right. It's the corporeal hereditament, right? So anything that's incorporeal is actually a corporeal hereditament because it came from there, right? Equity just assumes that incorporeal hereditament is theirs to do with as they please, right? Just like the corporeal assumes that they can do it, right? Because they're acting as the trustee, right? But government doesn't have the capacity to act in trust as a trustee because it was created by an act of law by the monarchy, right? See if I'm getting it? And the people,
Yeah.
the people volunteer to be as fee simple, which you have to be fee simple first before you can even be government. So you have to accept the land tenure first, right? And then you accept a whole nother contract to perform that strict function of government, which is bound by an act of law, right? So if you were somebody that's working for the government, when you're acting in that capacity, whether you're at that job or not, whenever you're performing those functions in that capacity, you're now performing a strict function of government, right? And you're now put yourself in a different position than if you were just sitting there and not doing anything and not invoking your function of government. See what I'm getting at? So that's why a cop, if he's at a bar and he doesn't fucking say that he's a cop and blah, 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 right? It's just a simple fight between two feet simple. But if the cop at the bar, before anything happens, says, you're under arrest, I'm an off-duty cop, right, blah, 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 well, now he's performing a function of government. See what I'm getting at? So there's a huge change in capacity in everything in English law, and that's why it's important to understand, well, fee simple were all these things, knight service and blah, 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 right, in the ancient land tenure, I should say in the feudal land tenure, and then how they changed into more of ecclesiastical subjects in the ancient land tenure, right, because of the Statute of Mormon and the incorporation of Christendom and the canon laws, right, into English law, right, because that's really what brought the canon law into English law, was the introduction of full force Christendom during the Faith Wars, right, and that's the time of our ancient land tenure, right? See what I'm getting at? So every new system had to create its own box, its own sphere, right? And they had to write its own laws for those subjects within it, right? And that's why every new box you move into is a completely new box, but yet that box was created from the first box, right? So if you take away that very first box, the third or the second or third box can't exist because it's created from that first box. So if you take that first box away, there's no substance left. There is no boxes anywhere afterwards, right? It's like
William, William, isn't every donor is their own box?
Exactly. It's an individual right. This is not a group right.
Because once you get your own land, you're going to have to write your own law if you had any person to read it, I guess, if you had a subject. But I mean,
that's the thing. You don't have paper, so why would you have to write law? You don't have printing press. You don't have a way to make ink. So how do you write? See what I'm getting at? These things are all this is all English law. We don't need everything that they created. Nature takes care of itself. Right?
Can I interject?
What's that, Kev?
A good way to see this point of view is when if we go back to the history and when the Queen's subjects went out on the boats and we had all iron and steel and all that, and we visited like the Hawaiian Islands. And we forced them into the trades because they wanted like the metals and that, and that's how we took New York as well, wasn't it, for beads and stuff like that, for things that they never had. Yeah. Was the reason fee simple and English laws even got itself in the door originally, and it was them wanting the need for the metal. And for stuff like that, and the need for the stuff that they traded to give away, the islands, New York and stuff like that was traded for beads, wasn't it? By the settlers. Every time in history, like William saying, once we took our lands, we'll have no print press. But do we need it? Are we going to make the same mistake once we've got out and trade with them and lose our right to our lands again? Because that seems to be the way in history that they lost the rights to the lands in the first place, was the one to trade.
You know, what you're saying is strange, because when I was down in but I was down in Hawaii, where I used to live for like 15 years. And on certain beaches, they used to have a gate across there, a little fence, or even if it was a car trail that you could normally walk down to the beach. But the beach was public for everybody; they could all go there. But you could the trails down to the beach across the land, if they had a gate or a chain or whatever, and it was a private easement, right? So you had to get permission from the owner. But after a while, everyone used to always cut the chains, and then everyone would get used to walking across that property down to the beach because maybe the owner was a foreign owner or something. And so that would become a public easement, and the guy would lose a piece of his property to that easement because people had been using it for like 10 years. And so whenever they wanted to try to get it off, they'd all go complain to the court, hey, we can't get to the beach. And then the judge would say, well, how long has that been an open easement? And they said like 10 years. So he would say, okay, well then it's a public easement from now on. But what you're saying is basically the same thing. When the Hawaiians allowed the British to come in and wanted what they wanted, or the New Yorkers, whoever they were, when they gave them what they wanted, what they did is they changed their own law to accept strangers coming through that gate. And once they accepted them coming through that gate, because they had to let them come through the gate to trade with them, and as soon as they didn't reshut the gate, then more foreigners came in than the actual people that were there, and they basically took over. It's kind of like what Sharia law would do if it came into, say, New York City, and more Muslims moved in than people that are there now, and they just changed the law to Sharia law. That's kind of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it was irrelevant, the geographical sense. It was more the point in, like, they lost the land, the right to the land, by trading just in the first place.
Yeah, if you have, like, commodities that they want, so, like, when they first went over to the Americas and started taking the lands, and, you know, they do it today in Africa. So if you have commodities that they want, then they'll just coerce you into a way with trading with them, or what they want to do. So they get you in your back pocket, and you're adjoined to them, and then they can take whatever commodity that is thereafter, and then dominate the lands and control the people. So, I mean, on a smaller scale, if you've got, like, you know, a few acres of land in England, there's probably not going to be too many commodities on there that they're going to be after, but it's whether you can resource for yourself to take care of yourself. It kind of goes back to a bit like what William was saying earlier, and then obviously you do have the issues with customary law, with what Ez is saying, you know, people creating their own easements, their own walkways, bridle ways, or there could even be, you know, ancient pathways, Roman pathways that do cross the land. So, yeah, there's a couple of issues, but I think on a smaller scale, in terms of them sort of taking the land back, I don't think it would be too sort of concerning in the UK. If you've got an island in Canada, you're trying to take an island or something like that, then they might be a bit more keen to put the shackles and chains back on you.
That's why people used to trade their daughters, right? Because they didn't have anything else to trade.
Yeah, in Hawaii,
you can have my daughter
for just one nail. It was one iron nail, and was like 20 women.
One iron nail.
It was sick, mate. But it turns against them, and that's what happened. Because they were charging extortion rates. And the people who they were trading with didn't understand the concept of ownership, and they were jumping aboard their ships while they were moored up and robbing them, but they didn't know what robbing was. They just thought, yeah, if you grabbed it, it was yours. So, like, they're trying to tell them, no, you can't just come here and take. But that's what they were doing, and in the end, it caused him to lose his life, didn't it? Cook was stabbed up, wasn't he, by the natives? What happened was he was on luck. He come at a time when the natives were in, like, some sort of religious thing that was peaceful. Yeah, so they thought he was a bit of a god because he turns up, this big white dude with a beard and all that, on these big ships. So, like, to them, they were like, who's this fella here? and like it was at a religious time. You come back about 6 weeks later to restock up, and because it weren't in the script yet, this dude coming back, like he got a totally different reception, and in the end he stabbed him. And he died. That's what the lesson I learned from that bit of history. But then it turns out that I learned New York was treated the same, and I think you'll see that just being repeated all over the globe until and that's how the Crown Corporation, or the Commonwealth as it's known now, was originally built. Just by trading bits of shit, really.
Learning the lessons from the past. So,
yeah,
William, for instance, how are, how you get a writ of prohibition to prevent other people from these kind of takers coming on your land once it's your land? Because you're the only guy that basically could police that land, it being your land. So you get them to protect the other fee simples from coming against you, I guess. But how do you yourself protect your own land? You just, I don't know, you just go out on the porch with your shotgun or what?
Yeah.
No, you would be calling their police and getting them to come and remove them.
So kind of like calling their country, that'd be like kind of like one country calling another country and say, hey, your guys are coming across the border in one of my areas.
Come and get your cattle.
Yeah, come get your cow.
Get your cow.
I'm going to eat it. Say. Come get your
here in England, like we've obviously there's various police forces. You got the Metropolitan, and then you've got your standard police, and you got the City of London police, and the City of London police have jurisdiction over the whole country for things like economic fraud. So anything to do with economics in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, City of London police have jurisdiction over the whole country. So if you're, if you're suspect, you think you've been done over and for fraud, for example, you'd call the City of London police, who would then come out to you in England, out of their general jurisdiction. So I don't know. I can kind of see that, if you've got your own land, it's still, you'd still might have to call their police to, help sort of defend it.
That's why I brought up the example of like the countries, it's like if one country is next to another country, which is kind of like a donor against another donor on their own land, and they start to have some type of incursion into that land over their boundary, whatever that would be, they agreed upon boundary, then if you don't inform the one in charge about the incursion, then you basically accept it. And so as they accept it, then they slowly kind of move over onto your land, basically kind of could move over the fence if they wanted to. So you have to have somebody that's in charge of that land, the donor in charge of that land, to call them up and say, hey, you need to, back off my land a little bit, or whatever the situation would be. Otherwise, you'd lose it by tacit acquiescence.
No, you could never lose it by tacit acquiescence again.
Then where's the border on the land? Where is it written down that that's your border?
That's why you have to go to the court for your deed of confirmation.
It looked like a void, I think, to them.
That's right. You're exempting your lands from their jurisdiction, and the fee simple and government don't have that jurisdiction to do it. That's why the Queen's representative does.
Okay, well, like the land that you're claiming, it has a meets things that are actually stuck to the land.
No.
That's bound in that system, innit?
That's only an equity, because you got to remember that equity has to keep track of all the waste that's done on the land. So when you want to put in a fence, that's why you have to call hydro and all these other things, right? And if you want to build a deck that's so high off the ground, right? If you're not building it right on the ground, you got to start, right? All these things you need a permit.
That's not what I meant, though. I wasn't saying about changing the land. I said you use this like the giant tree is one corner of your property. And the giant rock down here that's been there for 100 years is another mark of the property.
Okay, but that's up to you. But that's what I'm trying to explain. It's your land, so now you have to figure out how you're going to do the accounting for your lands. However you wanna, if you want to count every tree and measure every tree every year, you can. If you want to count every pebble or rock on your property, you can. Right? It's really up. It's now how you want to run your corporation, because you got to remember that everything that you're doing, that you're creating, is a fiction, because you've created it. It's not nature that created it, so it's a fiction. So no one has to agree to that if they don't want to.
Yeah, I guess what I'm not explaining it properly, because what I was trying to say is, when you have your land marked out, whatever that you claimed, and there's a bunch of fee simple people around you, or whatever, tenants around you, do they have a copy of your particular borders, or do you?
Okay, well, privity of us, if we keep in mind that the privity of a state at all times, and what trust law is, and what the capacity of these people are, that's why every question that you ask in law is dependent on the individual. Who are they? What capacity are they working in? Right? And where do they live? All right? That's why a judge asks, before he can determine anything, he asks you, what is your name and where do you live?
Right.
Right? You see what I'm getting at? So that has to be the very first question that you ask whenever you're dealing with anything. Right? And that will give you the answer. Because if the guy says, well, I don't work for anybody and I have my own title and absolute lands here, okay, well, now you have no law, you have no agreements with this person, anything with the color red, you have to agree on what that color really is. You see what I'm getting at? So, and then when it comes to, let's say it's a fee simple subject that's not operating as a function of government, right? Well, they're in a different area. Now you know that they're bound by the laws of their jurisdiction, and if you want to know them, you have to look where their laws are stated. You see what I'm getting at? So most people don't understand what any of these things are, so that's why it's up to you to be able to understand this, to be able to live outside their jurisdiction. Because if you can't determine who and what is in what jurisdiction and why, then what's going to stop you from going back into... Yeah, because the catch is, because here's the catch. Once they give you your trust back, it's yours. Whoever you give it to next is your own fucking problem, and they're not going to get it back for you. Because now it's your folly. Because you're of age to know better. And that's why this is such an extreme matter for people to get their estates back. Right? Because once you get it back, it is yours. And now there is no law to get it back again for you. Because whatever agreement you make after you get it back is the agreement. You see what I'm getting at? So people really have to understand that if you can't show that you can maintain your own trust and that you can actually understand how you've given your natural rights away for equitable agreements and what that means and how that happens, you're not going to get out, because you're right, because you're not showing that you're fit to handle the trust, right? Because everything in a trust means you have to be capable of taking care of yourself or that thing, right? And that thing right now that we're talking about is your natural rights. So that's why all this is so important, that people realize that it's what you believe, right? Just like how people research the law and what they're actually looking for. They're not actually looking for freedom in law. You can tell by what people post, right? They're not looking for freedom. They're looking for an equitable freedom, right? They don't care what true freedom is. They just want to be able to go and spend whatever they want. If they want that Ferrari, they want to be able to go get it, right? If they want to have butlers and everything else, they think they should have it. They think that they have that right, right? That's not what we're talking about here, right? That's not what this is, right? So when we actually understand the true foundations to what these things are and what makes you subject to somebody, right, we realize that a lot of those things that everybody's wanting to try to do is the reason why that they're not finding freedom, right? Because if everybody just looked just for true freedoms, they would find it. If you see, you kind of see what I'm getting at. So a lot of it is basically.
He would or he wouldn't find it. I didn't understand what you said.
Well, you would find it if you were just looking just for true freedom, right? You see what I'm getting at? Not for half-ass freedom, right? For true freedom, you would find it.
You would just release every one of your agreements with them, and you would be completely free from any agreement with anyone else.
No, your actual true, like even that in itself is the only thing. The only reason why we can't just say, to the government, like go into walk into the court, because you actually can. But the problem is that what we're trying to preserve is what's called the interaction between men, and this is a natural law rule. And it's when interaction between men is basically when you make an agreement with another, whether it's an individual or a group, that agreement stands. And when the two parties to that agreement, whether they're a group or individuals, it doesn't matter. When those parties no longer abide by that agreement, all that is left is war and violence. And when we look at English law, it has proclaimed to be the protector of all lands and everybody's natural rights, and has proclaimed this to the world. So that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because it's actually restricting all these in fee simple from ever usurping our actual natural rights. So when we look at the interaction of men aspect alone, just specifically it, because English law has this actually written, and there's actually from what everything in English law states and how they state it, they have to do these things when we do something specific, right? And that's why they call it a contingency, because it has to be something specific. So in my opinion, the reason why you can't just go in and say, hey, screw you, this is all a lie, total bullshit, right? For what it really is because it would destroy the interaction of men, because there's actually an agreement in place that says that it's not your folly and all these things that we're actually showing now. So only once they fail, right? And I mean they as in the ones that have the specific duty to do that thing that you're requiring to be done. And this is what takes us into another level of Jenga, you could say, with the capacities in English law to determine who actually has the right to do these things, because no one's acting in their own right. So only once we actually have it actually truly figured out on who exactly, and go through all the actual steps, and have it actually denied by that person that is that person that has to do it, is required by law to do it, becomes lawless. Only then do we have the natural right to stand up against it in any form necessary to stop it. And that's the interaction between men, and that's one thing that we always have to, in my opinion, is the most important thing. Because if we destroy the interaction of men that has been created, I honestly feel that we will fall back, not into Armageddon, because Armageddon's the wrong word. I think what the best way to look at it was we would descend to almost the Stone Age, because the interaction of men happened well before the Bronze Age and the Metal Age and everything else. Interaction of men was the very first thing that had to be worked out for us to start becoming groups. You kind of see what I'm getting at? For any two people to start to work together, there would have had to be an agreement between them. And it doesn't mean on paper, right? And natural law and agreement is if I say this, I'm going to do it. You don't need a piece of paper, and you don't have to chase me around with that piece of paper reminding me that you made that choice. Or I would say reminding me that I made that choice to do this thing. So when we look at the base,
so if I summarize it simply again, you're I'm a simpleton. If you go up to something on their property, and you say, "It's out my property," and they say, "This is my property, get off," and they decide, anyway, they tell you to leave, then you can be forced off your own choice. And so now you could take them as in their fee simple capacity, because when you walked up to them, you asked, who they are and what they do for a living and whatever, you found out their capacity. And then you go to their boss, basically, which is their government, group that they've joined, and you say, "Hey, I tried to claim my land, and these guys deported me out of my right." And of course, you have to have clean hands when you do it. And that's basically what you're talking about in that situation. Correct?
I've got to pull my headphones in.
Sorry, I got a couple of we're waiting. Sorry.
Did you hear that?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I couldn't hear you before.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's just it. Well, can I get into this one little piece, and it'll kind of walk us into that now? Because everybody can still see my screen, right?
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a case law from the NL, that's Newfoundland Supreme Court. And the biggest thing is that to start off with is this highlighted spot right here. Because anytime that anybody tries to claim by virtue of the title, now, as we are starting to realize what titles are, right, and the person, right, so when we combine a title and a person, doesn't that exactly tell what jurisdiction we're talking about right now in the very first sentence? Where there's a contest between a person who claims by virtue of his title, right, and a person who claims by long adverse possession, right? So this case law is already telling you right now that this is only for fee simple, right? As can you mute for a second.
Yep.
And right, so it's talking about somebody who has a fee simple title and another person who is just claiming it by squatting on it, right? Adverse possession. It's basically squatting on it type of thing, or even holding a title for it or for a long period of time. But we're going to see that this is actually talking about somebody who's trying to squat on the land, right? So the biggest thing that we have to start off with in all English law is that there is, first of all, a presumption, right, that the true owner is in possession, right? And that the cession, right, we all know what cession is now, follows the title, right? This presumption is not rebutted or in any way affected by the fact that he is not occupying what is in dispute. Right? So now this is going into the common law land tenure. Right? Because we don't actually have to be occupying lands for it to be ours. Right? We're a fee simple subject. If he has 500 acres of land, he's only actually in possession or occupying his own home acre of land, where his house is, where his actual residence is, right? So in equity law, there's a few different presumptions and everything else that's actually added into this that is not in common law or for the donor, right? And now if we go to the next line, in order to oust that presumption, right? So in order to remove that presumption, right, it is necessary to prove an actual adverse occupation. So now he's getting into the equitable laws, right? Because you can only take property by adverse possession in equity, right? You can't do it in common law. That's vesting your lands from afar. Right? First, which is exclusive, right? So in order to have an adverse possession in fee simple, you have to have, right, an exclusive, continuous, open, and notorious. So you have to have possession that's out in the open for everybody to see, right? And continuous. You have to be there every day. So that means you can't go and stay there for a night today and go there 6 months and stay another night, and another 6 months go stay another night and claim adverse possession in fee simple. You have to actually go and move on there, right? But if we remember the date of this, he actually gets into that where you can't even squat anymore. So all this adverse possession you can't do anymore because you can't squat on lands, right? And after that has been proven, now this is very important because now he's going into the land tenure. The position is that the owner is decised. Remember what decised is? And that the other person is in possession. Right? So that means that, right, the true owner is dead and gone to sea, and that you're taking it in the capacity of a corporate person. Does this all make sense to everybody, what you're seeing here and why he's writing it the way he is? Okay? So, because you got to remember, this is a judge in equity. He can only discuss the laws of equity, and he can only bring up the things that are wrong that are being brought forward in this case, right? And he doesn't even have to get into it much. That's all he has to say, right? Because now he's totally said, like, obviously what you guys are trying to do is wrong because you're doing a mixed action, right? And a mixed action and a mixed jurisdiction is vexatious. So as you can see, this case doesn't end up going down the way he wants it to, but that's a good step into where what we're looking for. Now this next one, is in 1974 from the Ontario Supreme Court. Right? Extinguishment of owner's title. Now, remember that an owner is assumed in equity to be, right, a true owner, which they're not, right? So we're talking about extinguishment of the equitable title, right? A person in possession of land in the assumed character of the owner and exercising possibility, right, the ordinary rights of ownership. He has a perfectly good title against all the world, but the rightful owner, right? And if the rightful owner does not come forward and assert his title by process of law within the period prescribed by the provisions of the statute of limitations applicable to this case. So now you got to remember, he's talking about the statute of limitations, but the statute of limitations in equity is called statute of limitations. It's also called a statute of limitations in common law. But in common law, we have a different applicable right, because it's your natural rights, and there is no statute of limitations, right? See what I'm getting at? So you can see that there's specific. If everybody reads this stuff carefully, they can see that they specifically add in this right here to make sure that this can work for all jurisdictions depending on who your capacity in the English law is, right? His right is forever extinguished, right? And the possessory owner acquires an absolute title. I don't think I'm going to have to bring up the commentaries upon Littleton, that very first quote about decisor and so on and so forth, right? And same with how this is actually being referred to, because if you don't come because we got to remember how the Sedeke Trust is set up in this entire statement here as well. So all these levels are all at play, all at the exact same time, and the fundamental rules to each one of them, the original fundamental rules to each one of them, take priority in everything that you read, right? So the statute, just like the statute of limitations, just because they wrote it like that, just because they wrote the statute of limitations, doesn't mean that the statute of limitations from 1985 applies to you, right? The statute of limitations 1985 applies to the ones in its jurisdiction. So if you're still the corporate person, then yes, it applies to you, right? But if you're not the corporate person, then the law that applies to you applies to you there. See what I'm getting at? So when we're looking at, when we take this to the next level, that English law already is we already know that by English law, as soon as you grant that title, that land tenure, and you become the corporate person, you've extinguished your right forever, because it's a what? It's a life estate, right? It's forever until you choose to return back from sea and claim it, right? So that's why fee simple is also fee simple absolute, because it's conveying two absolute rights depending on the capacity that you're in law. If you're in fee simple, then you have the true absolute right to the equitable use of that property until a number of certain things can happen, right? The government can come in and cheat the lands to appropriate it for the use of the group. There's many things, right, that can fall in line that could remove that property from the possessionary right of that one in that capacity, right? So that's why that it keeps going into these things, because it's taking these assumptions that nobody knows and it's bringing them into the equitable law. So by these case laws bringing this stuff in here, by you actually understanding this, you can now take this case on and into the court, and when you tell them this sentence, this paragraph, and you dissect it like we are right now in front of a judge, he's going to shit himself. Because he knows that you know what you're talking about, and he cannot justify anything different. So now you have rebutted, right, the presumption, right? So if we keep looking at this, the statute of limitations is a law of extent, right? Extensive, right? Not of acquisitive. I'm not going to pronounce these words. Prescriptions, right? It operates to bar the owner out of possession, right? Right? It operates to bar the owner out of possession, the fee simple owner out of possession. It is not to confer title on the trespasser or decisor in possession, right? Now this is where that Coke upon Littleton. This is where that Coke upon Littleton thing is going to really come into play. Kev, can I
Mute
get
your mic, Kev.
Sorry, mate.
Just give me 1 second here. Thank you.
So they're always basically going to the person who's doing what they want to do, and only barring the person of doing what they want to do if the donor or somebody appears to conflict with what. In other words, if there's no disagreement, then the guy can go ahead and do it.
Exactly, but that's it. That's how everything in English law is. If there's no one that's going to bring the claim forward, the claim does not get justified. You don't get remedy for it. So in English law, you have to know that you've been injured. You have to know who injured you, and you have to know the law that says that the person that injured you can't do that. You have to have the law that says that they can't do it to you, right? And then you have to have the remedy, right? You have to be able to prove that there is some sort of remedy to get a remedy for that, right? So by proving that the person can't do that to you in law proves that they have to have a remedy, right? And if equity doesn't have a remedy, but they also have the law to restrict, right? Then common law has to make the remedy. See what I'm getting at? So, getting back to this, this decisor and decision, and so on and so forth. I'm just gonna minimize this. That this is not to confer a title on anybody that's in the capacity of a trespasser or a decisor in possession. Now, what makes a decisor? What makes decision? You guys remember that? Right? Because if we... I should have done that. Give my Windows a second here to open.
That's why I just posted in the chat too the definition of decisor, but comes up with something else. It also says that this person can be both. He can be one who puts out another, or one who puts another out of possession wrongfully, or he that dispossesses another.
Well, that's the same thing. Dispossession. Yeah, dispossession.
Out of possession, out of ownership. The true owner would put the one who was the fee simple out of possession. But he that dispossesses another would be the true owner going and putting the fee simple guy out of his possession.
No.
No?
No. You got to remember that we're talking about two different rights in law. Here, I'll grab it for you right now. Because there's a right of ownership, and then there's a right of possession, and then there's those that have the right of both. Right? So as we can see right now, right, that there is just proprietor, right, proprietus, a right of ownership, right, and also just possession, right, possessionist, right, a right of cession. So when it's just possession, you're seized, right? It's a right of cession, right? Because we all know what cession is, right? It's a part of livery by cession, right? So it's granting a feudal contract, right? So this is saying if you only have just possession, right? You're seized of your lands, right, or possession. So you only have a right of cession, which is possession, because if you're in cession, you don't have the right of true ownership, right?
Possession is just interest.
Not even. You only have an equitable interest.
Yeah.
Right? And the equitable interest is not the thing itself. You make from the thing itself.
Right. Right of you.
Yes, because that's the only right you get. That's right, because that's all that by joining the feud, that's all you agreed to is just accepting whatever you can make off the things.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why I was having a problem. I didn't mean to confuse anything, but I keep seeing possession as the interest of the use, not the land itself, but just the use of it, an interest in it, but not the actual land. So it's possession, but it's not true possession because it's not truly yours. You're just basically staying on the land until the donor shows up. So one is just an interest in the land, and one is the actual land itself in absolute.
That's right, and that's why you have a title. Because that title is the deed poll.
That's right, and the true owner of the land really doesn't need a title.
No, because nobody can take it from them in fee simple anyway. Because they don't even exist. They don't even have the capacity in law to take it from them. Because they can't take anything. The monarchy took the land in trust for you, because we all accepted it. Look at how many people around you right now are screaming that they don't own their lands in the true capacity. Everybody's accepting it, right? So nobody's even a decisor, because they haven't put right. No one who puts another out of possession of his lands wrongfully. There's no wrong yet. In order for there to be a wrong, I have to do something to you, and then you have to tell me I did something wrong.
Right.
And when I don't act, right, when I'm supposed to, that's the wrongful action. Now you have something that's justifiable to go to the courts, or to whoever my superior is, to get the remedy, because I'm ignoring it, right? Because I did a wrong to you that I should have known, right? Because it's law, my law, right? And you're telling me, hey buddy, you can't do that to me. Here's the law. Please stop, right? Or I'm gonna want this, right? See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And when I get that, right, that's that cease and desist letter, right? That's what a cease and desist is, right? Hey, dude, you're doing this wrongfully. It's against the law. Here's the law. I'm telling you to stop. You have this one choice to stop, or the next time you do it, you've been warned that this is an injury, right? So the next time, you're fucking going to the court, man, and you're going to answer for it, and you're going to answer it in common law and equity, because I stand in common law and you stand in equity. So that's now a double injury to me. See, and that's why the judges are going to step back, way back off you, as soon as you give them notice, proper notice, that you're not a part of the system, and hey, you got this one free, the next one's not, right? See what I'm getting at? And I honestly think that's why when I got stopped and back here because they forced me to stay there, and now they had full notice that they could not deny, right? They won't dream of doing it again, right? But not until I got into that position and got that proper notice to that extent did they back off, right?
So
And
somehow your notice finally got through, is what you're saying.
Well, I hand delivered them, and then I went and I stood up in a corporate court saying, "You have nothing. Here's the paperwork to prove it," right? And I made him ignore it, and I got him to ignore all the things that made him injure me. You see what I'm getting at? So they can be ignorant that time, right? But they can't be ignorant this next time when they run into me on the side of the road or any next interaction, because now there is no way they can claim ignorance because they're under full notice, and there's the cease and desist, right? I don't name it a cease and desist because I'm not in equity. By me giving notice, in my own words, right, is that, right? Because that's my law. That's the law of nature. I don't have to speak I only have to speak in their language enough for them to understand that they're injuring me, and I'm not going to allow them to keep doing it. Right? So when we look at decision, right, it even goes even farther than decisor, right? Because it's actually the actual deprivation of the possession, right? The privatization of session. So that means that now you're privatizing. Remember what actual private law is? Where you actually truly own your own land in your own jurisdiction, right? That's the only true private law, because everything else is in equity, and it's not actually private, right? See what I'm getting at? Because you don't have the right of ownership, so it can't be private, right? Right? Usurpation of the right of cession and possession, an exercise of such powers and privileges of ownership as to keep out or displace him, right, whom these rights rightfully belong to. Right? I put in these rights, but that's basically what they're saying, right? Because you're actually keeping somebody out that is actually given notice now, right? So we can see that, sure, this is wrongfully, but nobody's actually made any notice or anything else, right? Because we're going to notice everything in English law. There's two forms to it. There's before the notice happens, and then there's after the notice. So now there's no more ignorance here. There can't be ignorance because you got fully notified, right? And that the person's basically there saying, hey, I now want this, and you have to give it, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? So everything, how the injury happened, by what capacity, when it happened, when you gave your notice, right? And what has happened after, and all these other things are always, and that's why I say the 10 levels are always at play in everything. And they all start at the very first thing, the land tenure, right? And then your capacity inside it, right? And you see what I'm getting at? And all those things have to fall in line, and that's what's called finding the seat in law, and every judge has to follow it. There's another case law about fraud on the court, and that's when equity doesn't want to recognize these things, right? And then they bring you back into the court and try to justify that previous court claim, right? And they did that. They tried to do that to some guy in Scotland. And well, it got thrown out when they went after him to try to justify the previous court case to make him pay from that previous court case. Well, that by them going after him again and him just waiting for them to do it made them screw themselves, right? So we don't have to actually go after any equitable claims that they come after you unless they're going to try to put you in jail, right? Then it's best just to go after them right in the Queen's Bench and stop them. But the things that they've been, the only things that they, like, for me, the last thing was, like, possession of like a quarter of marijuana and a failure to appear. So, and that's the only failure to appear I've had in my entire life. So, they couldn't do anything to me no matter what. So that's why for myself it was like, yeah, I'm gonna play this equity thing right to the end, right? And I'm not gonna go and spend the money to get that overturned because it means nothing to me, right? Why would I go and spend money on something when it has no authority over me? If it truly has no authority over me, when they come after me again, right? If they come after me again, that's when I'm going to deal with that part at that time. But I'm planning on already having my estate vested, so it should be moot either way. So, but yeah, that's basically the thing about making sure the notice and that, right, about the assumed ownership of lands, right? And this assumption keeps following. It's the same thing in common law, right? And that's where the treatise on land tenures, it's like the top downloads on omnipotence. It's like the first or second. And that goes with the law of uses and trusts. Those were both directly quoted in Blackstone commentaries. They're recognized in the courts as, can you pause? Mute. And by having those, by reading those, we'll explain, like the land tenure is the first one you should kind of read. I would say read the first 2 or 3 chapters, put it down, and then grab the law of uses and trust and read the first 2 or 3 chapters. The farther you go into the books faster, the deeper it gets into the law, and it's kind of mix you up. So if you work in the beginning of the chapters to really understand what they're talking about in the beginning of the chapters, before you get farther into the book, will really help you not get mixed up farther into the book. So I would suggest, especially for you guys now, because we're kind of getting farther out of the basics now, because you guys are really starting to see what what these capacities in English law is, and how they apply to what that person can do and can't do, and so on and so forth, right? So by moving into the land tenure, we'll tell you what the common law truly is, and that it's actually the feudal land tenure, and that the Magna Carta is the constitution to that. And we also got to remember, whenever we're talking about a constitution, the constitution is telling you that there is a trust, and everybody that's inside it is not working in their own right. So this is also telling you that everybody inside a constitution is a juristic unit. They're a group of men that are de facto, and it's only de jure because the people inside it have accepted it. And this goes into the de facto doctrine. And this is also on omnipotence if you do a search in the books for the de facto doctrine. Very powerful. And this is where you're going to find all the evidence about them not being able to force you to be a corporate person, and that the determining factor for the personal jurisdiction is whether you accept it or not. As soon as you no longer accept it, the civil and provincial and federal jurisdictions all fall away, and all that's left is common law. So they can still come after you with common law until you vest your lands, right? Because common law is also English law and law of the subjects. It's not natural law. It's not the law that you are bound by. It's the law that protects your warranty and that you're claiming your warranty from. So as we can see, that that law of tenures and uses and trust will really help get the understanding on where all this started and how the actual donor and donee relationship is the first level of trust that created the corporeal hereditament that everything is created from, right? And if that corporeal hereditament is also a use for a fee, why in Canada we have like what's called the Canadian Ownership and Determination Act, right? That specifically is the accounting, right? And if we actually look at it, even that in itself actually shows that only those with a future interest and in a proper capacity have that right. Right? So the beneficiary includes a person whose favor or whose benefit a discretionary power may be exercised. Remember, a discretionary power. Right? We're going to start going. You're going to get into more of this now with the contingencies of trusts, with the there's executory ones, and there's a whole bunch of different levels. Most of them are all equity. Just to let you know, 99% of them, when you trace them all, you're just going to come to an equitable end, and it's not a waste of your time. It gives you good knowledge, but it is a waste of time. And as you can see, the interest in expectancy means any estate or interest in remainder or reversion, and any other future interest. So, as we can see, that reversion and remainder in English law so far is the only two capacities in English law that have a future interest to something, right? So, and that future interest always comes to the type of trust and the capacity that you hold it in, right? So a fee simple, they don't have a trust at all. So they don't have a remainder or reversionary right in this trust, right? They only have a reversionary right or a remainder right in their equitable capacity and as an heir, right? Like when you leave something to your child as in fee simple, right? There's remainders and reversions in that as well, but that is all inside the equitable fee simple, right? So that's all the law from like 1600s till now is 98% of that stuff that's being discussed in there, unless it's specifically talking about the capacity of common law, right? And if you notice, there's nothing in here about a title, right? And those other things that are describing the capacity of those in fee simple, right? Because there's always a title, a deed, or something like that, right? Where in this and things in the common law and so on and so forth, it's always a vested or a contingent, right? Remainder, right? Because as Blackstone even states it, and the estates in reversion and estates in repossession, remainder and reversion section, as well as the next chapter on the real injuries for these things, is that it's actually a vested, right? It's actually a vested contingency, right? So we actually have the absolute right to it, right? But this does not include a discretionary interest, because we don't have a discretionary power. A discretionary power is those that are acting as a trustee. So because fee simple don't have the right in English law or in equity to manage your estate, only those within this act that have a discretionary power, right, as stated, can do that. And that's in I have all this. I'm going to be posting it right away, and going through it a little bit in more detail. But there's that if we go to I believe it's the top of this one. It tells you about Statute of Westminster. Westminster in the Canada Gazette. These things here, right? This is telling you, like, I have it all already, so you don't have to go dig to Canada Gazette. It was impossible to find. I actually had to call the government, and they actually found all this for me, and they couldn't believe it. I wish I recorded the phone call, because they couldn't understand even what they were reading, and they were like, this doesn't make any sense. I just kind of blew it off and just took the information. But as you can see, there's more stuff here that actually gives the determination on what fee simple subjects have the right to access this regulation, right? And that's what that's about. And it's basically only those that are operating in the strict function of government. It boils down to the director of the seal holder of natural resources, and whoever that capacity creates a law to manage it. So basically, he gave it to the director of natural resource. Not the director. What was that guy's name? Tyler Cummings wasn't the director. He was something.
Commissioner?
No. In Canada, Tyler Cummings, there was something, chief executive officer, I think he was. Something like that.
Yeah, of Natural Resource Canada.
That's right. So the seal holder of Natural Resources Canada, the one that was put in charge of the natural resources and this act, he made another act so that someone else can do this for him. If we notice that all these acts, these originating acts, give a main what's their names? I can't believe I'm forgetting the names now. But anyway, every province has its own. Jesus Christ, can't believe ministers, right? Like Minister of Natural Resources Canada, right? He created positions so that other people could manage a lot of the things, so he doesn't have to. So basically, what they did is
he delegated his duties, is what you're looking for.
That's it. So he delegated those duties. So he made a law that this next person has to do these things, right? As long as you fall into everything that is in that curriculum that says that they need to do. Otherwise, they can't do it for you. So all these different areas like property law and everything else, they all came from the original seal holder of the province, and the province seal holder delegates all these different sections to ministers. Then those ministers, again, do the exact same thing, right? Because the ministers and the seal holders don't do a damn thing. They don't do anything at all. It's a free ride because they delegate it all downhill, and they keep delegating it, passing the buck, right? So we send our notices to the seal holder and to the minister in charge of that area of law, right? And also who he delegates it to. Right? So this way you've given notice to every level of their juristic unit. That makes sense. So everything that in the key searches to find this, because if you notice, I'm doing key searches. If you look at the top here, reversion. So what I did is I went into CanLII. I'm going to show you this real fast. And you put it in quotes, right? Let's say, I'll just do reversion again, right? And then you click enter. Now, as you can see, it gets everything that's close to that word. So, as you can see, there's actually lots. There's 74,000, right? But then we can also slim it down, right? And then you can also go reversion and then future interest. Right? And now we're down to 123. See what I'm getting at? So and this is giving us even the case law. So if you only wanted legislation, look at this. Real Property Act, Law of Property Act, Conveyancing Law Property Act limitations right? Property Act, Canadian ownership and right, Canadian ownership and control determination, right? Court Order Enforcement Act, right? Civil procedures. See what I'm getting at? So by us using these proper key, by using their systems in a more defined manner, because you got to remember everything in law is so defined and so strict that by using our proper searches properly and so like not properly, that's kind of the wrong word to use, but in a more efficient manner, we can find that there's a lot of information that is really at our fingertips, right? So,
hey, that brings up something good, because you were saying that we had a vested contingency, right? So when I looked that up in the dictionary or whatever, it's under vest. Well, I don't remember where I got it, but anyway, it says they're vesting and a contingency are two different things. A vested remainder is held by a specific person without any conditions precedent, and a contingent is one which the holder has not been identified or for which a condition is precedent and must be satisfied.
hold on a second. Don't forget, you're reading the definition of equity because you're actually in a law dictionary, right?
Yeah, I was just looking at the difference between vested and contingent.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to. Just give me a second here. I'm trying to. There's a really good.
It was kind of like the idea of sovereign citizen. You couldn't be a king and a subject at the same time. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what they're getting at. But you got to remember,
would be something that, according to this definition, a vested contingency would be something that didn't have any conditions that had a condition.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna.
Vested almost means absolute.
Okay, everybody can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Everybody. So as we can see, it's three things. It's not. Each one of those things is like an and. Right? So the type of interest is first. So whether you have
Can you blow your screen up at all?
Here, I'll even post the link too.
You can do it yourself. You should be able to like just maximize it and then move it around.
Okay, so there's three types of interest given to grantees. There's vested, contingent, and executory. To start off with, everything is a contingency, because remember in English law, everything starts as a contingency, because if you've been injured and you choose not to make a claim to justify it, you didn't do the contingency to get remedy, so you're not going to get remedy. Contingency is the choice. Okay, so contingency is being used in two different manners here, right? First of all you have to choose it, and then it's also contingent, where you have to do a specific thing for another specific thing to happen, right? So they're using contingency in two different forms here, right? But yet it's still the same thing, right? Because if you don't choose to make the action and the proper action, you're not going to get the remedy. So that's where those things really come into play, right? So it's again, it's levels. right? And it's specific on what the definition to it is specific on the action and who's making the action in the capacity that you're in, right? See what I'm getting at? Everything goes back to that same seat in law, right? So at all times, everything that you're reading, your brain has to be cycling the main seats and the main determining factors for that seat in law to find out what the definitions and what the meanings are that you're describing for your capacity, right? So that's what's like, all these things are so tricky because we can never forget those things. As soon as you ignore or forget or choose, right, you've now gone into somewhere else where you're now in your own world, right? You're now making your own law, and it has no meaning to anybody but yourself, right? So if we look at reversions and right of reversion and right of entry is always done because of the future interest retained by the grantor. Remember, it's always the grantor in equity and in common law has now, since admiralty law and this stuff, it's now made the assumption that we are the grantor and that we retain true ownership. Where in the previous land tenure systems, this assumption is very hard to find. So, in the ancient land, in the feudal land tenure, you will only find it in the Statute of Westminster II, right? The writ of Fermedin. And then they go into the assize of novel, the courts of assize of novel decision and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is that we actually didn't get the easy recognized in right in law for the actual to have the true ownership retained to us since this new land tenure system. So the reversion occurs when basically a definite estate ends, right? And there is no other grantees with a future interest in that property, right? If the grantor does not convey a fee simple title, but rather an infinite title, right, which will end at a particular time, then if no other future interest had been conveyed, the property will revert back to the grantor, right? So this is why they made all fee simple lands are in abeyance. And why they made it so fee simple can't recognize these things and everything else, so you can never disinherit yourself, right? The equitable system can never take it from you, right? And this is why it's so important to understand the capacities. And as we go, the right of reverter, right, is conveyed as fee simple determinable, right? Because all fee simple estates are a defeasible title, right? And when you get it exempted, all they do is they write in their titles that you now have an indefeasible title, and you have a private act which is between you and the monarchy, and then the government has to create a private act within its own jurisdiction for you as well to restrict their subjects and their goons from infringing and abridging your natural rights. So, and they like to throw in the church and all this stuff all the time to get everybody going back into the faith, right? Because we'll realize that
Are the goons protected from from just coming onto your property or anywhere now you walk on any of their land?
You should be able to answer that yourself with the what is jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Are you
Well,
bound to their? Are you bound to their law, or are you bound to their law, or are they bound to their law? So if you got a private act created that restricts them now all the time from abridging and infringing your rights, see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
But
you don't carry that. You don't carry that around with you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like you would today. That's just in the record. That's just it.
But that's why you carry ID. That's why fee simple carry ID. So you're identifying yourself as the trustee. When you don't have any paperwork to hand over, and there is no assumption that you're the corporate person, they don't like for instance, the last time that I got pulled over there, he wouldn't even ask me for ID. He wouldn't even ask me my name. He only wanted, as soon as I showed him that, basically came up, because I was trying to get out of the truck, and he was like, well, no, I'm right. You're under my protection, and right, for your safety, you got to stay in the vehicle. And basically, fucking, it was like, all of 2 seconds, it was like, you're free to go. Whoever. No ID or anything. And I've never been pulled over.
You did that after you gave him your release. I did it, and I just gave him my name, didn't give any ID. Forced me, basically, to give him a last name, saying everybody has a last name and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm not in your system and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, got to be this big old hassle about they were going to force me to be the corporate person, whether I liked it or not. And then what they did is they asked, in this case, just to finish it up, they asked if I had insurance, and I said, no, I have private. And they said, well, then you don't have insurance, so now we've got to, impound your car. And they searched in my car, and they found the old title in there, and then took that old title and then ran it back to the computer and worked it so they could figure out who I was. But if I had been my release, then I wouldn't have had to deal with that.
Yes, you would have. Because the release still doesn't give you the right to drive a car uninsured down the road. You don't have your own jurisdiction yet. See, and that's why when the RCMP pulled me over, as soon as I showed them that everything was insured, that was the end of it.
Well, I had written a bond, my own private bond, so I was.
You don't have that. You don't fucking have that right, man. You don't have that.
I didn't say I did. I said that's what I did.
But that's what I'm trying to get at, and that's why when you said that you had your own private insurance, that's why the cop flat out told you don't have any insurance then, because they don't recognize that. So that's why you need the deed of release, the confirmation of release for your lands, before you can start driving things around without insurance. Because your jurisdiction is what makes you not have to have your vehicles insured.
Yeah.
Right? You see what I'm getting at? Right? Because I've only removed the personal jurisdiction. I haven't taken away the subject matter jurisdiction. So when I'm going down the road, the vehicle that I'm driving has to be insured. And insured by somebody in fee simple. Not by me. Because then that's saying that I'm acting in trust for that thing. Right? But the fee simple is required to have that thing insured. Right? So make sure it's insured. And now they can't hassle you when you're driving it, because it has nothing to do with you. That thing's in trust to the insured owner. Right? So everybody's going at this ass backwards, because English law is not the law over you. It's the law over the things that you're taking in trust. See what I'm getting at? So that's the issue that people are overlooking, that it's the things. And that's why once you get your own lands, right, now you're not required to insure that car, right? You have your own domicile, your own jurisdiction. Now you can take that thing anywhere you want with you, and it don't need to be insured. See, now that you have your own lands, now you can hop in that car and go drive in those jurisdictions, and there's nothing they can do. Because they don't own...
Harm someone.
What do you mean, harm somebody?
You get in an accident.
Yeah, so whose roads are they? Whose car did they hit with whose car? Do they own anything? Doesn't their insurance cover them from any injury or damage that they cause?
Yeah. But
Now is there any contract between you and the fee simple that you have to pay them to fix the things that they don't own? That they don't even have a right to? That they're supposed to insure to make sure that they can have it fixed and repaired and everything else to make sure that they don't injure the true owner of that they're holding those things in trust for, which is you?
what if you harm the person that you knocked into?
How can you harm something that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Right? But then again, you got the laws of nature, right? If you're gonna go and buy a Ferrari, go and fucking drink a 2.6 of fucking booze, right? And then go drive down Main Street during a parade at 200 miles an hour, guess what? You're fucking gonna get strung up. Because now you're on the laws of nature. And now you have to abide by those laws of nature. So if you're gonna be that ignorant, right? Because you gotta remember, fee simple is created for those people that are ignorant, that can't see those things, that can't protect themselves from those things. Right? You have to be able to see those things and realize that when you do those things, you got to make amends yourself. You won't require a judge to do it, because for one, you wouldn't do those things to require somebody to require somebody else to judge you by it. Right? No, that's that interaction between men. If you're going to be outside and live independently, if there's no laws between us, but you think you could just keep going around and doing all these things and hurting us, we're just going to fucking come and take you off the planet. Because you don't listen. You want to be lawless. You want to keep injuring us and enforcing your slavery and your tyranny onto us because you can't see better that these things that you're doing them to other people. If you want to go and buy that Ferrari and build yourself a racetrack and kill yourself at 200 miles an hour, go right ahead. But don't come and do that near me and my children, because I will take you off this planet before you can take my children off my planet. That's the seriousness of natural law and common law in natural law. Because common law and natural law is natural law. Because we don't have any common law. The only agreement is that if you're going to actually do something that could kill somebody, and you're not going to stop yourself from doing that just because you can, means that I'm going to stop you from doing that against me if you're going to try to. Because that's my natural right.
I get that, and I understand. I was thinking that it was an accident that you did, but like I understood that the equity was because these people wanted limited liability, and when you have common law, you're in full liability. So whatever you do, you're fully responsible for it. But you're more responsible, so therefore less things are ever going to happen because you're looking out for it.
No. If you remember, like you got to remember that before 1985, you could use the excuse. You actually had that excuse that it was an accident, right? But now people have taken the ignorance of the law to such an extreme, and they think that they can go in and say, I didn't know that somebody was going to cross the fucking street in the city with 4 million people, and that I didn't know that I shouldn't be driving 200 miles an hour down that street, racing 5 other kids, right? Like, come on. You see what I'm getting at? These things are created and they're done because the people are being so ignorant that they want to fall back on ignorance again. And again and again and again. Right? Ignorance of the law and what your actions are going to cause can only take you so far. And the people in society have taken that to such an extreme that there's nothing left. ignored this so long, right? Now people are trying to honestly live off the grid and do all these things that are injuring their own trust and themselves, right? To such an extreme manner that the government literally has to go and make off-grid living illegal, right? You see what I'm getting at? And all these other things illegal because people don't understand that you can't do street racing in the downtown of a city, right? And all these other crazy things, right? That if they actually had the basic understanding of these little things, that these things, people wouldn't have these ignorance and we wouldn't have these laws in place, right? It's the ignorance of the people that is making equity having to create these laws, right? You see what I'm getting at? So, yes, government's at fault. The library companies of the City of London Corporation are at fault. We're at fault. The judges are at fault. Everything's at fault, right? But until we snap out of it and say, hey, the buck ends with me, and I'm going to accept that blame, and I'm just going to move on, right? And I'm not going to keep trying to smack other people in the face for the wrongs that they're doing, because I'm just as wrong. We all got to sooner or later bury the hatchet and realize that, hey, we can't be looking at these other people and accusing them of these wrongs and everything else until we get to a certain point. And that's where, when we look at how this is set up with English law, because how the trust is secret and everything else, we will see why they even incorporated that there is no injury until you give notice that, hey, you injured me, and this is how you injured me, and please stop it, right? And it has to be in there. You have to stop, because just by sending a notice saying, hey, you've injured me, you're not asking me to stop, right? You're not asking me to keep doing it. So what exactly did you send me this for? See what I'm getting at? That's why a cease and desist is a cease and desist. It's saying, hey, please stop. And this is why. Right? It's twofold. Everything is always twofold. Right? This is why, and please stop. Right? And if we really want to simplify everything, that's what all this really is. The releases, the confirmation, right? Because the confirmation, right, that you giving the release is your confirmation to them that you don't like it anymore and that they don't have that assumption anymore, right? So all these things are working on many different levels all at the exact same time, right? And that's why when people are reading the release and confirmation sections and commentaries upon Littleton, they get so confused because they're meaning the same thing. They're just talking about different capacities within the English law, right? Whether you were married and how you were married, if you had this kid with this person, that kid with that person, right? They go through, I think he goes through probably 100 different types of releases and confirmations for the different types of capacities in English law, yet there's only one section and one paragraph that actually applies to us and what we're doing, right? So by us understanding how these things are written, we'll make it so we can realize, okay, when they're talking about this, okay, we can scan through this, not completely skip it, but you scan through it and look for certain words. Because when you see those words, that means that they're, right, that's when they've dumped that one sentence in, right? Just like when we're looking at the case law, right? They dump in this one sentence right here. This one sentence on this one page totally explains everything in this case law and everything about land if you know what this stuff is actually talking about, right? Decisor and possession and what fee simple actually is, and so on and so forth. See what I'm getting at? It completely, and that's why it's so important that everybody actually has to be able to read a paragraph and not just read the words that are on it, but actually understand the words and the capacity that it's being used in for that particular sentence. Because you'll see that this every paragraph and almost every paragraph that's discussing anything that is touching on the land tenure, right? They combine all the different every jurisdiction is combined into this one paragraph. from the ancient land tenure all the way to today. Everything. He's bringing up the municipal law and everything in this one paragraph. Everything. The British North American Act, how it applies and everything else, the Statute of Uses from 1535, the Bill of Rights 1688. He's referring to it all in here. Does that make sense to everybody? Can you actually see the other things that are written in here? All right, so that's really where we have to really start understanding of what we're reading and how it all applies, right? Because they write it in such a way that, like, 5 years ago when I read that, it meant something completely different than it means to me today. And I mean completely different. So if everything that you've read your entire life in law till today is that wrong, don't we actually have to go and reread it all again? See what I'm getting at? So a lot of the assumptions that we made before have led us down a rabbit hole, right? And it's once we get out of that rabbit hole and start realizing the many jurisdictions and many capacities within this stuff is when we're actually going to really get to the bottom of this.
Hey, William, what was your light bulb moment after 5 years of reading this stuff where all of a sudden it had a different meaning just by learning the words?
To be honest, the biggest thing is municipal law. It was finding that municipal law is the actual disability. So by you joining municipal law being the disability, and land being everything. Land is the only thing that English law deals with as the corporeal hereditament. So between the land and the new municipal law jurisdiction that they've created in this system, and how that because this modern land tenure system is the only land tenure system that has put the corporation between the fee simple and the monarchy. So what that did in trust law, that now made you a third party, right? It moved you down a rung. So in all the previous land tenures, you were actually directly connected to the monarchy still, because you were through her feudal lord, right? The lord manor for the territory, right? They were done with lord manors and ecclesiastical bishops and shit like that, right? But this new this new admiralty jurisdiction was the creation of this a crown corporation that was granted to the people, right? And that is the biggest factor right there, was realizing that because of the way that English law writes their trust law, that as soon as you're 3 degrees or more, you are no longer party to the trust. So if we look at the donor and the monarchy, that's the donors first, monarchy second. Well, in the previous land tenure systems, the fee simple was third, right? In this admiralty law jurisdiction, the corporation's third, right? And now the fee simple citizen volunteers to the corporation, right? Not back to the monarchy, right? So that added that put the government in the place of number 3 and you to number 4.
It was like a trust within a trust.
Yes. So that's the hardest thing for people to really understand, and that was the biggest thing, that it was a trust inside of trust inside of a trust. And fee simple is all trusts inside of more trusts inside of more trusts, which are all based on that corporeal trust, right? Because it's just the land and everything attached to the land, right? Because all the fee simple create everything from the incorporeal hereditament now by license by the government, right? And so that's why the government is now the fulfillee and the fulfior, because the government gives a license to the fee simple, right, by purchase, right, and it's by purchase because the government collects the fee for the land. The Canadian Ownership Determination Act is its own individual trust for every individual. It is not combined with anybody else. The Consolidated Revenue Fund is for all the fee simple and all the corporations within the common law. Those are two different trust funds, right? You see what I'm getting at? They're two different things. One is for the waste that they're allowed to take the money from, right? Because you got to remember, the Canadian Ownership Determination Act, you only get 12.8% of your true inheritance, right? And that's why a set to kiwi is unlawful, because you're only going to retain 12.8% of all the value to that land, right? And that's the accounting in the Canadian Ownership Determination Act, which I just had it here, right here, right? And one of the other pages, if we go to here.
It's funny because I know all this stuff as the golden calf, like in the Bible, and you see it in Wall Street because it's the bull and the bear, and all that. But anyway, the golden calf was everybody used to have their own individual gold, and of course you could get bopped on the head and get it taken. So what they did is they all combined their gold all together, and they made this giant idol of a calf, of a bull or whatever. And that way, the criminals, when they came in, they couldn't carry that big old chunk away because it was too heavy. So that kept it safe. And basically, that's the same thing, except now they're in funds. And in America, we call them CAFR funds, which is Certified Annual Financial Report. But it also spells the word calf, because that's what it was. It was the golden calf, or where all the people's money is. It's all in those accounts, in those CAFRs. But in Canada, I guess they call it something different. So,
because one of these actually has the actual percentage. Forms, I actually have all these forms as well. Everything that's being referenced in here, I have. So don't spend a lot of time trying to find it. Where is it? It says 12.8% somewhere here. Because as you can see, this is the accounting of it all here. There we go, 12.3. So this is the actual accounting for Canada, right? So this actually gives you all the accounting stuff and everything, and how it, right, and how it all gets changed around and everything else. Because everything that all this like your RSPs, all the equity, like the fiat value to all this stuff, is all calculated in a certain fashion. So if anybody that has RSPs and everything else, I suggest you find this for your jurisdiction, and you give it to an accountant, and you find out where best to put these things for when you vest. Because when you look through this, when the regulations, some things multiply by 4, some things multiply by more. So let's say, for instance, if they said that our RSPs, you would get 6 times its value. RSPs, and for when you vest your estate. You see what I'm getting at? So, but really, I don't think it really matters, because by the time you're at the age of 40, I think it's over $40 million. So considering that you're going to have your own lands, you're not going to be doing much purchase because you'll be growing your own food and taking care of your own self. Like, how much do you really need, right? And once everybody realizes what purchase and the fiat dollars are, it's not going to have any value. It'll end up being toilet paper. Well, you won't even use it as toilet paper. You'll probably just burn it all after as for fire starter, right? Because it's not. Once people realize that only those that accept fiat under a license because they're seized of their lands, right? Because that's all that they can accept is the fiat, right? Because everything else that they take, they're taking it actually as the monarchy, and they're not getting it themselves, and they're just going to have to pay more rent to it. Like, people are just going to stop doing this stuff because everything that they want to get out of, they're doing the opposite, right? Like, they don't want to be taxed on things and everything else. So what do? They go out and buy more things. You kind of see what I'm getting at? Like, everybody wants to be out. They don't want to be within the English law jurisdiction, but they keep buying more things by titles by purchase. So once these basic fundamentals get, people realize to the extent of what these things really actually mean, I think it's gonna change fast, and then the money isn't gonna be worth anything. So I suggest is putting it all into things of natural resources, right? Like animals and greenhouses, and right, go and get tools and set up a metal forge and all these other things so you can create the things that you need to on your lands, right? Get them while you can with you, so you can just go give them some fake stuff and just go grab it instead of writing a writ of waste and going through all the bullshit, and just live happily ever after.
See, my take on it would be, with that $40 million, for example, use a shed load of it to set yourself up so that for self-sustainability, and then you're not going to need the value for money, are you?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Is there anything else was that all clear enough? Does anybody have any questions about anything that we discussed or anything? Not a one?
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, what would you guys like the next meeting to be about?
I think it might be a good idea to start doing like mock trials or mock like court cases.
I like the sound of that.
I'm agreed.
I could do with like learning.
Are we going way too far? Like, I'm biased. So.
I'm ready for moot. I'm ready for the moot trials. Yeah, because that's what they're called. Google search moot court cases and moot trials. All the law universities have them, and a lot of them record them and put them on YouTube. It's called moot, M-O-O-T. What would you go? For a moot case, we're kind of that's going to take a little bit of a setup, because we have to kind of pick a specific capacity in law. Who, you kind of see what I'm getting at? It has to be specific who the actors are going to be, what capacity they're in, and what the issue is going to be over, if you see what I'm getting at. So in order for us to have a moot court case, we need to have those things kind of set up.
Hey, why don't I suggest we use mine, because I know the terms of my particular situation, and I've already got the release supposedly. So technically, I'm next to going to trial or to vest. Right? That makes sense. In other words, if you just use the situation that I'm in as the situation, or anyone anyway, it doesn't matter. But anybody who's ready to go to the case whatever the situation is that they've done, their capacities and jurisdictions, whatever, then that's what's set. And I already know what mine are.
Yeah, I guess we could do that. Then you'd be acting as yourself then, and then we would have to pick who's going to be acting as the crown, and who's going to be acting as the fee simple that you're taking the lands from.
Yeah, that's easy. See, you become the crown, and then Shaw becomes the fee simple who I'm trying to take his lands from, and then we just play it out.
You need a judge.
Oh, okay. Who wants to be judge? Jay. Jay has Jay for judge. Jay, you want to be judge?
I'll vote Kev. He's got a bit more court experience than me. I wouldn't know what to say from a judge's perspective.
All you gotta do is be a dick. Anyway, it's just a suggestion. I just figure that that's what the situation is. Like, we don't have to make up a situation. We have one. And we can use each person's situation as the situation, you know?
Yeah, we definitely could. Yeah, that's actually a good idea.
That way it seems more real, and the people are really doing it, kind of. Is that, you know, when we make mistakes, we'll have to point them out or whatever.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing about the moot court case. You don't get the determination till after. Right? Because that's the whole point of doing the moot case, is that with the moot case, the only thing that changes is there can be more of a dialogue with the law that's being presented, right? Between the one that's presenting and the judge or panel of judges. Because a moot court usually has a panel of judges, right? They're like a Supreme. Yeah, it'll have like somebody that's a Supreme Court judge, somebody that's a corporate judge, and then somebody that's working in the lower courts, right? Like, it usually has 3 or 4 different capacities of judges for a moot trial, right? And then as the students bring up new things, right, they kind of have a little exchange back on why are you, right? Like, what exactly are you getting at with this, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of where we will go with it too, right? It's just to plug you to find out how good your knowledge is in that specific area, where in a normal court that won't happen.
Yeah, so you'll try to kick my butt out of the court in the next first 5 minutes. Say sorry.
Exactly. That's right. You know, and we can even do one where it's you this time, and then we can do one where it's me that's doing it the next time, and then you, right, where a few views can be the crown and a few views could be the judge, and you guys could, right, try to stop me from vesting my estate.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should start with you first, because, you know, you kind of know when you can come back.
Let's do it now quickly. Only takes 2 minutes, doesn't it?
Justin's ready to go for more.
Get out my course.
It's only been 4 hours already.
Yeah. Okay, so when's the next call?
Wednesday, same time, I guess, and we're gonna have to make another meeting time anyway. So what do we want the next meeting to be about?
You just said moot court. We're gonna have a moot court.
Did you? Is that enough time? Is that actually enough time for us to prepare to have a moot court in 2 days?
I don't think it is. I say we do that for the next one.
Next Monday, yeah. Yeah, I think we should make it for next Monday. And
Let's do for the next one. Let's go back over those 2 slide videos that you had done and kind of bring all that information back to mind, because that's really will put us in the state of frame for our Monday call.
The incorporeal and corporeal hereditaments and that.
Yeah, like the way you described it tonight was awesome. It was bang on, which I think will be very key.
Okay. So then that's what we'll do Wednesdays. We'll do the incorporeal and corporeal hereditaments and the levels of trust.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good.
And
what do we have to do to fix the problem with Omni?
I'm gonna have to get in contact with JChat, the guys who we got it from.
Let's get everyone connected first.
Those tickets coming back, I can answer them back, but that's not helping anything. Because when a person writes a ticket, they're coming to us. They're not going to anybody else.
You have that.
I think they're supposed to. They're supposed to go to you, and then you go to JChat. No.
That's right. Yeah. So don't reply to those as because they're not going to anybody.